So good morning. My name is Alyssa Brown with Open Door Ministries located in Gainesville, Florida. And I'm here this morning with Anna Prizzia, candidate for Alachua County Commission Seat 3. Anna, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. So we're hosting this series of interviews to help our church members and by extension, the community learn more about where our candidates stand on the issues that affect us. And so I'll go ahead and jump in with that. Anna, I'd like to talk about your platform a little. What are the most pressing needs you see in Alachua County and how do you plan to address them?
Sure. Well, of course, not a platform point, but certainly one of the most critical and urgent issues is public safety around COVID-19 and thinking about not only how we keep our community safe and healthy, but also how we help our economy recover as people are really struggling. So that will certainly be a priority for me, looking at how we're deploying the CARES money, the federal funding that's coming, lobbying our state legislators and national legislators to keep bringing that relief money and supporting all of the efforts that we can to support our locally owned and small businesses to keep them afloat because they really are what bring the unique character to our community. But my platform pre-COVID, when I launched my campaign, was really more about three different things, although economic well-being is one of those. And for me, the local economy and building a robust and resilient local economy that has a foundation with our small and locally owned businesses, with local food and our own local talent is really, really critical for me. And part of that means that we have to do a better job of having the mechanisms and the tools to allow that sort of economic development to happen. The Fed actually came to Gainesville in, I think it was 2015 or 2012, and they did an analysis of our community. And what they found was that we lack a couple key tools that other communities around our country have that actually allow for true community development to happen. And those two tools were a community development corporation and a community development finance institution. Each of those, the community finance institution is essentially a bank with a heart. It's a bank that actually doesn't have the same requirements, so it can lend to people that may not meet the credit thresholds. It can lend to homeowners that might be what other banks would consider risky. It can take on community development projects that other developers might not take on because they don't see the profit margins. So it's a bank that will allow us to do this. And then the CDC, the Community Development Corporation, is essentially a developer with a heart. It's a developer that does the same things the bank does, takes on those kinds of projects, even when there's not a profit to be made. So we need those two mechanisms, and a focus of my work is economic development, local economic development, and those would be two key things that I would work on with our private community, nonprofit community, to build those or attract those tools here. The environment is always important to me. Next to COVID-19, climate change is the biggest threat to our economy and our way of life. And as storms increase and temperatures rise, Florida is poised to really see massive change quickly. So we need to do a good job of planning for ways that we're going to address that change as it comes. And we do emergency management at the county, so we have to be thinking about bigger storms and the ways that we help people with relief when those things happen, but also how do we mitigate, how do we develop in a better way, in a smarter way, in a greener way, as we build infrastructure and plan for the next century that our children are going to inherit. How do we do a better job than our previous generation and maybe even our generation has done to date? And water is also a big issue for me within the environment, our water quality and our water quantity. We're seeing private corporations come and try to bottle our water. We're seeing mining interests come in and that can really impact the quality of our water. So protecting water is a big issue for me. And then last but not least, equity and justice is a huge issue for me. Disparities are definitely our greatest weakness in this community. And for such a small community, it's really been very disturbing to me throughout my entire life living here, how how much disparity there is and how much racial divide there is in our community. And I think that it's the responsibility of our local governments to lead by example and to be the ones that are kind of leading the way in how we begin to push equity and justice from the inside out. So working with the public and private sector to think about how do we do this in our community better, but in our own actions at the county, how do we build equity and justice into our hiring practices, into our contracting practices, and ensure that we're doing it every step of the way.
Thank you. Thank you. So all those answers provide a perfect segue into my next question. So especially from the perspective of East County, in the past, the county commission has tended to favor policies that speak to the environment, which is definitely important. But sometimes, in the opinions of some, at the cost of the economy, and now with equity also entering, the conscience, I think, of our community. How would you seek to better balance those 3 E's, is what I call them: environment, economy, and equity? How do you strike that balance? Because they're all very big goals.
Yeah. Well, that's the eternal question. And, as the former director of sustainability, that was literally my job at the University of Florida for a number of years. And there's not an easy answer. But what I will say is I think that it's an unfortunate reality that we created a false dichotomy between equity or economy and the environment. Because those that are lowest income, those that live in the most vulnerable areas, are the ones that are going to experience environmental injustice as well. And the ones that are going to be most affected by climate change, the ones that are going to be, flooded first, who are going to have much less resilience when it comes to, if their houses are less efficient and their landlords aren't taking care of them, they're the ones who are going to be impacted by rises in temperature the most. So, it's an unfortunate reality that environmental issues become justice issues just as much as economic issues become justice issues. And so we need to tie the two together, and we need to look at ways that we can develop in a way that's sustainable and that we're driving our economy forward while also thinking about renewable energy, about energy efficiency in buildings, about bringing forward sort of a new sustainable economy and workforce that's focused on environment and on equity rather than on just profit margins. Mm-hmm. as a focus. But I do think that, and I hear a lot of that, like back and forth between, what happens in East County and that being an environmental argument. And I would say that, to me, that was, again, another false dichotomy. The west side of our county is just as vulnerable as the east side of our county. Yes, the east side of our county holds a lot of our wetlands and protects a lot of our water on that end, but because there is no water on the west side of our county, that means there's no clay layer protecting our aquifer, which means the people over there are impacting our drinking water every day with the decisions they make in their lawns and landscapes. So we have to start being also equal players and thinking like, if we're going to create policies, if we're going to make decisions about the way we manage development, we need to be doing that across the board, and we need to have fairer growth and development policy.
Thank you. Thank you. So you mentioned equity a little bit ago, and I wanted to touch on that a little bit. So to say that race is a hot button issue right now would be an understatement. What are your thoughts on the issue of race in Alachua County, and how do you believe that we can approach that realistically and honestly as a community, and how can we increase equity here in the next several years?
Yeah, again, complex issue, but I mean, the first thing is just to face it and address it. I mean, I think that's the thing. Like, I find that in a lot of rooms I'm in a lot of spaces I'm in, we're still tiptoeing around the issue. It's like people don't even want to use the word race or talk about black and white or Latino or Native peoples. Like, it's just, there's always these little dances that people are doing around these issues. And I think that we have to stop doing the dance and we need to bring it forward, and we need to make it a part of our dialogue and our discussion. And we need to be willing to call each other out when we see something that's happening that isn't right. And we need to systematically and intentionally look at all of the structural systems that we've built and why we have the inequities that we have. Because really, when you look at equity, to me, what it comes down to is power and decision making, right? And an imbalance in that. And so we need to look at all the places where we have power and decision making happening and make sure that everyone's voices are heard and that everyone has a seat at the table.
Thank you. Thank you. And one final question. In what ways do you believe you can work with the faith community to move our county forward?
That's a great question. Well, our faith community is such a powerhouse for reaching people and for communicating messages. And I'm so excited and impressed to see a church actually doing this, interviewing a candidate and bringing them forward to their people. It's again, that's a great example of where I've seen a race divide. Like, in white churches, I don't ever see people ever talking about politics. It's like, oh, first you don't even talk about religion outside, but then you're definitely not talking about like religion and politics. That's a big weird and no. But I've seen more of the Black churches doing that, like bringing politicians forward, talking about how this impacts their communities, and I think that's really amazing. And I hope that that kind of civic engagement can be led by the faith community, particularly the Black churches, and help us understand how churches act not only as faith leaders, but as community leaders, and that their place in the community is about helping some of these equity issues, some of these economic issues, and working with our institutions and our local nonprofits and things like that to make sure that people can make ends meet, people can thrive in our community, and that people's voices are heard, because they're a powerful conduit to talk to people, because sometimes it's hard to find people. And if we can go to the churches, to the ministers, to the church meetings to reach people, it's a great spot to have dialogue in a space that people feel comfortable in and a space that people trust.
Thank you. So is there anything I haven't asked you that you would like to say?
I guess I would just like to say that because many people probably in your congregation don't know me, but I've been doing this work for a really long time. I haven't been a policymaker. I haven't been a politician or held office, but I've worked for almost 2 decades in the institutions at the University of Florida and had to navigate complex bureaucracy and be a change maker in the middle of that bureaucracy and really push progressive ideas and sustainability and equity and environment and economy, while also trying to think about the fact that we're spending taxpayer dollars and we need to be judicious and we need to be thoughtful about that. But I've also been on the front lines in the community doing this work through the nonprofit Working Food that I founded that partners with Cultural Arts Coalition and GDNA and Grow Hub and so many others to talk about local food access and food justice and equity, but also just as a volunteer in my own right throughout the years with groups like Habitat and the Alachua Nutrition Alliance. Like, I've really been on the ground, and so I think I understand these issues from the lens of a community member who's experiencing these issues. And I think that helps when you're sitting on the dais trying to make decisions for an entire community to have experienced it on the ground and understand the realities of the issues and not just sort of the concept of the issues.
Thank you so much. Listen, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I really appreciate you taking the time to come out and answer our questions. And thanks to those of you who are watching. Yeah. And we'll see you next time. Thank you so much, Anna.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.